Welcome to Changemaker Q&A. I'm Tiana, and in this episode, we are joined by a guest whose intellectual and change-making journey spans more than half a century. Michael J. Dorfman is an 83-year-old investigative author, speaker, and wellness advocate whose life work sits at the intersection of health, freedom, and independent inquiry. From his early days questioning the Vietnam War to his current writing on information control, longevity, and plant-based living, Dorfman has dedicated himself to asking difficult questions, especially when those questions challenge the status quo. His most recent book, Information Warfare: The Battle for Truth and Freedom, explores the way that information is shaped, filtered, and sometimes suppressed in the digital age. He's also written extensively on the power of nutrition and lifestyle to prevent disease, extend life, and cultivate resilience. In our conversation, we discuss what it means to think independently in a world of curated and censored narratives, how to maintain wellness into our later decades, and why freedom of thought may be the most important form of freedom that we have. Welcome to Changemaker Q&A, Michael. It's great to have you here. I was wondering if you could kick things off by just telling us a little bit about your journey, what it is that you do, and what has kind of sparked this commitment that you have to uncovering topics like misinformation on different global issues.
Okay, well, great to be here, Tiana. And so I think that it goes back to my first. I was born in 1942, so I'm 83 years old, and I think that my first challenge or the first doubts I ever had about what we were being told by the mainstream media, the government, was during the Vietnam War, which up until that time I believe that the government and what they were telling us was the truth about why they went to war and what was going on, and that's what I believed. And a friend of mine, he was on the opposite side, and he told me about what he was reading and he was understanding. And it was at the time that the protests were starting, and I started reading some newspapers. They were called at that time underground newspapers, which remember the Village Voice, the East Village Other, and they were telling the other side of the story. And gradually, also the music of the times, the protest music, Bob Dylan and others, just got me thinking. And that's when I started. And I began protesting. I became part of that, and that was the my first doubts. I think my second doubt came with it was another theme, and that was cigarettes. Uh, in the 50s, I was smoking cigarettes. I was 12 years old. Everybody was smoking cigarettes. So so in the movies and the stars, they were promoting cigarette smoking, and everybody. I mean, if you've ever seen some of the movies from the 40s and 50s, you see that everybody was smoking. So that's what was happening, and uh, gradually I did investigation after what happened with Vietnam. I started investigating what was going on with the cigarettes, and I saw that in the early, I think it was the late 60s, that the Surgeon General came out with the facts that cigarette smoking was linked to cancer. And what I did, my investigation, because that's what I was into, the investigation exposed that between the 40s and the late 60s, there were thousands of studies showing the link between cigarette smoking and cancer, and that behind the whole thing was the cigarette companies. They were so powerful, and they paid doctors. And I remember in my book, The Information Warfare: The Battle for Truth and Freedom, I show some photos of these actors and actresses and sports figures that were just supporting it, and they were paid by the cigarette companies. And the cigarette companies were so powerful that they didn't allow that information to get out until the 70s, when people were realizing that it's the danger of cigarette smoking. That's when the whole reverse started. And then it continued with the Iraq War, and then with health, with the pandemic. So this is where I got into this whole That's why I consider myself an investigative author, because I was just digging deep into different subjects, including climate change, what we were being told. And so I wrote that book, The Information Warfare, which I published last year. And right now I'm doing a different, I'm focusing on something different, although it's similar in the sense of how the manipulation of information, and it's the longevity wellness revolution, which is the book I'm writing right now. And I hope to publish by the end of the year.
Mhm. That's so interesting. I wonder if you could just give our listeners like a quick overview. What are some of kind of like the key strategies or tactics that are used by whether it's government or industry to kind of manipulate the general public through information? And how can they maybe like begin to identify this in the information that they might be consuming?
Yeah. Well, one thing I noted, during the pandemic, uh, I realized that there were experts who were against what the government was telling us, and the mainstream media was telling us about, the pandemic and how dangerous it was, and that. But what I was noticing is that people who were speaking up against that were being censored, and some people were threatened with losing their jobs. And in fact, it happened to me. It was late November of 2021. And Dr. Michael Greger was giving, I don't know if you've heard of him.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sure you do.
Is he
So
nutritionfacts.org? Is that
exactly. So
yeah.
he was doing these Facebook presentations on YouTube as well. And there was the opportunity to ask questions. So I was watching this, and it was a Facebook presentation, and he was talking about nutrition, and then he mentioned something about the vaccines that were about to come out. They came out eventually in January, but here it was November, and I asked them the question: how do we know the vaccines are going to be safe? And immediately there was a pop up from Facebook saying that you are the only one who could see this question. That and that was it. No, every time try to get on with that question again, and every time the pop up came up, so I realized at that point that what was going on, and it was really surprising because who am I? I was just asking a simple question, and eventually with my Facebook group, I was censored and I was blocked from promoting it. So I just knew what was going on. That was during the pandemic, and so I just started investigating and found out, some truths about the vaccines, and that was from the government, and they were also, blocking news, and you couldn't publish news. I mean, that's it's fairly well known that there was a lot of censoring going on at that time. So, that was what I saw with the pandemic, and then and then it went on to the climate crisis, and we were just hearing when you start hearing one side of the story, and they stop you from hearing and investigating and researching other points of view, then you have to question. And the end result for me was that you have to question everything, uh,
Mm.
because there's so much information. It's going crazy now with the confusion. Even the alternative media. It's you got to, as far as I'm concerned, you really have to make a sincere attempt to research to find out, at least to listen to different sides of the story, and then you can have your own. You make your own decision. But if you're not allowed to listen to all sides of the story, then if people are lazy and they just don't, well, I'll just accept what I'm being told, then that's your prerogative. But there's a lot more out there that we're not being told to this very day.
Mhm. How do you suggest people navigate this idea of like doing your own research when there's just like, I feel like heard someone refer to it the other day. We live in this age where there's just like a fire hose of information being sprayed at you constantly. And it's so hard to kind of know what to listen to or who to listen to or even how to make sense of it. Do you have any kind of like practical skills or, questions people can ask when they're um, reading or listening to something?
Well, it took me a while, to really separate what I believe to be true or what I now see as some, information that makes common sense. So there are certain podcasts that I listen to and I watch. I I really enjoy that because it's the podcasts I listen to. They have different people with different points of view allowed to speak on the different themes, and with that, I can sort of identify or choose what I feel is the truth. Like one of them is I really like. I don't know if you've heard of the Duran. Duran is it's a podcast and they have guests on there, and another one is Judge Napolitano. He's another one, and I really like it because they come up with questions and then have different guests, and the guests have their own interpretation what's going on, and then I find out who I people I really like to listen to. For example, there are people who travel around the world, and I like to hear that they're being interviewed from Russia, China, South America, Europe, and they travel different places and they have different points of view and they speak, from different places. And I enjoy listening to that. And from all of this, I sort of form my own interpretation of what I think is going on. For example, with the regards to the climate crisis, I write that also about that in my book. Uh, every time I hear something that when everybody the mass believes something, then I sort of that's the place I want to focus on, because if everybody believes something is true, I remember what's the name, General Patton. He had a quote saying, "If everybody is saying the same thing, if everybody is thinking the same, then somebody isn't thinking." And that's what I take to be okay. So I'm going to check into it. So I get into the climate crisis, I get into the pandemic, and now what's going on with the wars and the geopolitical problems we're having. So I listen to different people. I listen, what I can do is I can write out a list, and I can send it to you if you want to put it on your notes after, about different podcasts I follow, and also individuals that I feel they know what they're talking about.
Mm. Yeah, that would be great. Um, so you kind of describe yourself as like an investigative author. And I was wondering, you said you kind of started looking at the information that you were being told about smoking and things like that. Have you always kind of done this type of investigative work as like an independent researcher or scholar, or have you kind of had support from like publishers or whatnot? I feel like a lot of people listening are kind of uh, interested in, different topics and things, and they're kind of having to carry out these projects like on their own. I know, like for myself personally, I just finished a PhD and I want to continue with my research, but outside of the academy, because I just don't think that there is the resources and support for me to continue doing my research the way that I want to do it within academic institutions. And so I'm kind of forced to navigate continuing with this work as like an independent scholar. And I was just wondering, how have you kind of navigated this as your career? And do you have any tips for our listeners who might be wanting to kind of carry out their own projects like this on their own?
Well, I do it. I guess I'm on my own. Uh, I don't. I'm not affiliated with any other groups, anything like that. So I do that on my own, and I'm just as I spend my time. I would say, well, my last book, it took me 2.5 years to write, and I spend about 2 to 3 hours a day, either listening, or watching, or reading books. I'm always open to like really expanding. And that, I guess, is part of my, I'm 83. So it's part of my challenge to keep healthy mentally. So I take, even doing a podcast, I'm doing lots of podcasts, but I enjoy the challenge, and this keeps me well mentally. And so I do this by myself, and I've come up with my own conclusions, and I try to be as sensible as possible in what I publish, bring as many facts into play and what I research. So I would. It's hard to say, like you were mentioning about, having to go beyond the academics to do it, your own work, and this is what happens when this is what was happening with the climate change crisis. That anybody who disagreed that it was a crisis, even though there is climate change, there's always been climate change for billions of years. But when you question it, and you're you're an academic, you only get funded if you go along with the mainstream. And that's what the problem is. So people, when they hear everything they hear about climate change, will be coming from those who are being funded. The information is being funded, and they're going to believe that. And you have to get out of that, uh, in order to listen to, or watch a different point of view that will make it easier for you to come to your own conclusions.
Mm. That's really interesting. Um, yeah, it's definitely like something that I feel like I'm kind of forced to navigate as much as I would love to. I mean, if a university wanted to fund me to keep doing my research, I would probably be more than happy to kind of take it, as long as I still kind of retained, I think, ownership of my own research and
Okay.
intellectual property as well. I think that's one of the challenges is the minute you're kind of, I don't know, forced into a position like that, and then you're kind of told this is the direction that you have to go.
Yeah.
Um, it is challenging, and I think part of it is maybe the fact that we live in a capitalist society, and so all of these things are going to be kind of driven by where the money comes from and where the money goes,
Yeah.
which makes it really challenging.
And it's it's just where's the freedom of speech, where the way it's supposed to be, in a democracy. And it, I guess gradually that freedom is being taken away from people, and gradually, so it's at the point now where it's, you just know what's happening in the world today. You start protesting against what the governments want you as far as your points of view. What happens? You can be in a difficult situation, if you want to defend your rights and your freedoms.
Mm. Would you say that freedom of speech is maybe one of the biggest changes or challenges that you've noticed since you kind of began doing this work? I mean, your inquiry kind of began way back during like the Vietnam War. How has, kind of activism and this space changed, do you think, since then? And do you think the challenges that, people who are kind of activists today are facing the same challenges as back then? Or do you think that, the landscape has kind of changed a little bit?
Well, yeah, I think it's much more difficult now because during Vietnam, even in Iraq, there was no problem. You wanted to, as long as you weren't violent, you can protest. Even with the whole scene with Martin Luther King and the protests about the racial problems that were going on, it was okay. It was part of society. And now I don't know how it is, where you are, but in the U.S., for example, even though I live in Mexico, in the U.S., they were started to have protests in the universities, and they were just, stopped. And now you can't even speak against, we're talking about what's happening in Gaza, for example. It's really changed a lot, and I don't know where it's going from here. And hopefully, because I think that the answer has to come from the people, that somehow, but we're being squashed, by the governments. But it has to become so powerful, I think, because what do people want? People don't want wars. People want to live in peace. 8 billion people in the world, it's only a few people that are directing what's going on now. And the people in the world, they want to live in peace. We're people, everybody, if you really listen to people from other countries, everybody seems to be the same, wanting the same things. to have freedom of religion, to have have a roof over your head, have food to eat, and I mean, we're human beings, and we want the same things, and that's what's really going on, and that's we're not allowed to protest that. It's getting more and more difficult, but it's happening, and hopefully, it's going to get strong enough that the governments will have to step aside. And I remember when Eisenhower, the president of the United States, well, in the 50s, late 50s, he said that when people want peace, I don't remember the exact quote, uh, when people really want peace, governments will have to step aside and give it to them. So that's going to take a lot, but that has to happen because it's the people that at this time in the world, this period in time, we have to be the ones that are going to make change, whether it's through voting, whether it's through protesting. But we can't just sit around and not do anything. So that's where I think the future is, if we're going to have a future.
Yeah. Something that I find interesting about your work and a lot of the people that I kind of chat to is you are quite, I guess, outspoken about how you promote like a plant-based diet and how you've kind of investigated a lot of the information that is out there from animal agriculture, pharmaceutical companies. Um, and something that I find interesting is that was kind of, when I was about 17, learning about animal agriculture and kind of the benefits of a plant-based diet, that was kind of like my gateway, I think, into really beginning to like question the information that I had been kind of told growing up and what I kind of thought was, I guess, acceptable and normal. So I was wondering, what has your work in the space kind of looked like? And if you could share a little bit more about maybe your book about thriving as a vegan.
Yeah, well, I became in 1976, I gave up eating meat. So I was a vegetarian, and I didn't do it actually for health. I did it because became interested in Eastern philosophy and religion. And on that side of the world, there were a lot of people eating plant-based. Well, fun foundation is plant-based. So I did that, and I continued for like 3 decades. But I was getting sick every year, not terribly sick. I would have the flu-like symptoms, and congestion, fever, headaches. But it was happening a couple of times a year. And my brother, who had been plant-based about 10 years at that time, he's gonna be 90 next in October now. So he told me, well, maybe it's the dairy. So at first I didn't want to give up dairy because of the pizza, and it was for many people giving up dairy is harder than even giving up meat. So finally, I just he said he told me to read the China Study by T. Colin Campbell, which I did, and another book by him called Whole, and I decided to make the change. And that was 17 years ago. I became plant based, and everything started. I didn't get sick anymore. Not at that. Once in a while I would still get sick, but it wasn't to that extent. And that was for myself. And then there was an incident that happened that was extremely important for me, which helped me to decide that I wanted to share the information with other people. And that was a friend of ours, Beatrice, who had a heart attack, and she was rushed to the hospital in Merida, which is in the Yucatan in Mexico. Very close friend of ours, and she went through quadruple bypass surgery. They sent her home, and she was okay until about a year passed, and she started having pain in her left arm, which meant there could be problems. So she went back to the hospital, and they wanted to put a stent in, but the vein that replaced the original artery was too narrow, and it didn't fit. And they said they couldn't do anything. And they told her that, go home as long as don't exert yourself, too much exercise, etc. What they didn't tell her, and they told my wife and also her son, is that she had about 6 months to live. So she came back, and I had already been into plant-based 2 years at that time. And I had read the book by Esselstyn, Caldwell Esselstyn, Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease, which was the book that Bill Clinton turned to, and he started eating plant foods because he was tired of he had already, I think, 2 stents at that time, and he didn't want to continue with that, so he did that. But anyway, Esselstyn was a head of staff at the Cleveland Clinic, which is maybe one of the top cardio hospitals in the world. And so he was always wondering, well, how comes with all the technology and the training and education that doctors have that we haven't made a dent in the amount of heart disease, cardiovascular disease that's happening. And so he went and got into diet and plant-based foods, and he was getting a lot of the rejects from the Cleveland Clinic, and he was having a tremendous success rate, over 90% in almost all cases. And people were living, instead of a few months, they were living 15, 20 years. So I gave her this book, and she read it, and she became a vegan, not completely, 85, 90%. And instead of living 6 months, she lived almost 9 years. So to
Wow.
me, it was like, wow, that's my friend, it's not somebody I read about. So
Mm.
for me, it was, well, how come doctors, well, why isn't that the default therapy, or the default, what we should be doing is at least suggesting change in diet to heart patients, but it doesn't happen. And you find out later on it's because of the power of the drug companies or the lack of education that doctors have. They don't get trained very much on nutrition. So that's what happened. And she lived, and when she passed away a few years ago, it wasn't even from the heart problems. So this was tremendous. And then for me, it was like, well, if this is happening with the heart disease, are there other illnesses, chronic diseases that diet would help, plant-based nutrition would help? And it is. You have high blood pressure, you have type 2 diabetes. So it's something that really got me into it, and I started speaking at events, and then I wrote my book in 2019, the Thriving Vegan. And the book I'm writing now is interesting because the Thriving Vegan was mostly on plant-based eating, uh, as being which most of the doctors that I follow, that I trust, are focusing. But then I got into alternative lifestyle changes when I found, and I started getting into that, and I just found out that, hey, you need more than just the foods you're eating. Even though to me, the nutrition is the most important part of it, and maybe 70% worth. But then you have, lifestyle changes, you exercise, and there's several things I get into. Stress is a tremendous factor today. So I get into that, and how to deal with stress, and also the, what do they call eustress, which is short-term stress that is really healthy for the body and the mind. So I get into that. So I'm writing about that now. So I think it's an addition of lifestyle changes, meditation, and other things that say, hey, now we can live really healthy past 80. We don't have to accept that our life expectancy is 75. And then I get into the blue zones where you see how these people live, 10, 15 years longer than we do in the West. And yeah, so this is what it is. And now I'm playing pickleball. I don't know if you know what pickleball is.
Yeah, it's become
Yeah.
like a big thing. I've
Yeah.
seen.
So here in Mexico, I play pickleball. I play like 4 times a week. And I'm playing against people at 30, 40 years old. And I don't even look at, see them as, hey, I'm in my 80s and I'm doing well. No, I mean, they're just players just like me. And I don't consider anymore so much my age, my chronological age. It's really the health. It's the however they call it, health span instead of lifespan. So that's what I'm into, and I'm really, my book, the one I'm writing, is the longevity wellness revolution, and I see it as a revolution because I'm looking at beyond 80, to 100, or even maybe beyond 100. May Looking at that is like the next frontier. And we shouldn't look at it like, because what is our concept? People get old. It's like, oh, yeah, he's in his 80s. He'll hang on for a while, or he's over the hill. Well, let's put her in a home. Or, it just, the whole concept that we have of people when they get past their 70s. And I'm trying to turn that around. I really am, because I feel that we have our best years ahead of us, or as good as maybe we've experienced any time in our lives. Because when you get older, you don't have so many responsibilities, with the children and the jobs. So you have all this time, and we have such a wealth of wisdom from experience, that we have a whole lifetime experience. And in other parts of the world, the elders are really respected as guides, as for their experience. And there's no reason why it can't happen now here. So that's what I'm really into right now.
Mm. Yeah, that's really interesting. I have noticed that I think there's like a bit of a generational shift, like for maybe like people who were my grandparents' age, they kind of had that mindset that like, once you retire, your life is kind of like over and you're just,
Yeah.
my granddad, he had Parkinson's and he went into like aged care and he just used to joke that he was sitting in God's waiting room, which was really depressing. But I look at like my parents and I feel like my parents, like my mum's in her late 50s, but she has like more of an active social life than me. She like goes to the gym multiple times a week. She has like friends. And so I feel like there's definitely like a generational shift and something that I only kind of realized recently. I don't know if you're familiar with Joanna Macy and her body of work, the work that reconnects. She created this really interesting body of work to kind of help people in the social change space, but it's been like a very influential body of work. It's kind of, she was a Buddhist scholar, but it draws upon kind of like deep ecology and stuff like that. And she passed away just last month, but her body of work, like it's called The Work That Reconnects, it's been very influential. And she didn't even create this body of work until she was like in her 70s. And I think for me to kind of like realize that, she had like a whole life before this, and then she's made this like huge contribution to her community and the wider world in her 70s. I think it's made me feel like there's less pressure to kind of do everything while I'm young, and kind of recognizing that, life doesn't end when you get old. Life ends
Exactly.
when it ends, like when you're in the, in the ground or whatever is when it ends.
Yeah, and so what's important is if sometimes when doctors tell a patient, because they have a chronic disease, you have 3 months or 6 months to live. If you believe that, so many times it happens. So much is right here. And if you start experiencing really health, or wellness, as I call it, because it's more complete than health, in the later years, you start realizing, hey, this is what they've been telling us, and this is what we believe, that it's all over at a certain age. And it doesn't have to be that way. And because yeah, it just doesn't have to be that way. If you start seeing, and it's not only believing, because once believing, there's believing and there's knowing. So you believe and you believe, and then all of a sudden hey, I know that this is true for me. I know this. I know that my body has these incredible healing powers, and I could trust it. So that starts, then when people start seeing things and understanding that, then everything can change for them, and they can start, hey, yeah, there's a whole life, even past 80, there's a whole life ahead of me, at least another 20 years, maybe. Or even if it's less, I don't really care how old it is. I just know that it's happening for me, and it can happen for other people, that they can really thrive in the later years.
Oh, that's awesome. You talk about this distinction between belief and knowledge. I was wondering if you could maybe just like kind of define the difference, and how does that apply when we're thinking about it in the context of like dealing with, all of the myths and disinformation in the world? Because I feel like there's kind of this paradox where, if we believe something,
Mm.
then we're going to look for that in media and we're going to look for examples where our beliefs are kind of proven to us. How do we navigate this distinction between, what we believe or what we think we believe?
Yeah.
How would you define or describe like what true knowledge is?
Well, it brings to me that to mind the term confirmation bias, which is when you believe something, and that happens to a lot of people I know, friends. Once you have a belief and the confirmation bias means that you just accept ideas that are go along, coincide with what you believe. So, and you won't reach out. It's too confronting. Conscious dissonance is another one, which is you can't hold two opposing beliefs at the same time. For example, if somebody is addicted to smoking, and then knows, on the other hand, that smoking causes cancer, it's too conflicting. So they'll say, well, you have to die from something anyways, just to rationalize it. But knowing is it's deeper. When beliefs change, you could believe anything, and it could change. That's the whole idea, the thing behind beliefs. So, beliefs change over time, but knowing, it's like you believe you can ride a bicycle, and you keep trying and trying until you ride a bicycle. And it says, I know, I ride a bicycle. You can never take that away from you. When you know something in your heart, in your gut feeling, whatever, from facts or from into experience, it's you just know it. And I have this saying, I forgot who this Indian saying, I think it was from Prem Rawat. It says, believing is okay, but for the important things of life, the important decisions we have to make, you need to know, and so I think knowing is just something clicks, and there's an understanding, there's a clarity that that's when you know.
Mm. I like that distinction. It's, yeah, you can know something like intellectually, but I think you also have to like feel it as well, like throughout, I don't know, your entire being or whatnot. Final question.
Yes.
As you look ahead to, hopefully the many, many more years that you have ahead of you, what do you hope that your work will contribute to future generations? And maybe is there a particular message or call to awareness that you would like to leave our listeners with?
Well, I think maybe first of all, I think it's important, as I mentioned, to question everything. I'm hoping that our leaders will wake up and do the right things, and they will represent the people, and hopefully that will happen. And I think it's up to us. I think that we can't really just sit back and let things happen. And because as long as the leaders are guaranteed that we won't do anything, they'll just keep on doing what they want, and they'll say, "Well, nobody's bothering me, so I might as well do it." So we can't let I understand that a lot of people and the people I know, they don't even want to bother. Don't tell me what's happening around the world. I have my own little world I'm living in, my problems and everything. But there is a time that we may have to make decisions on that, what's going on in the world, and we really need to know. It's not okay just to be conscious of yourself, your own life. We need to be conscious of what's happening in the world in order to make conscious decisions that can, if we don't do that, we may be hurtful for ourselves and our families and the people we love. So I think it's important to really challenge what's going on and not to be complacent, which is what's happening in the world. We tend to become complacent on our phones, especially the younger generation. We're just looking at our phones, and we're on, with Facebook, on TikTok, on all these, whatever. It's like just living in their own world, and it's not healthy. We have to. I remember what it was like when I was young. There wasn't, we didn't have that, and there was more communication with people. Now we believe that talking on the phone on our mobile app is as good as being with the person. And it's not the same, because when you're with a person, you're actually in front of the person. There's an exchange, an emotional exchange. There's an exchange of energy. There's exchange of so much going on, and we don't realize that. We think that, oh, when we're on the phone, it's the same thing. It's not the same thing, and that's the scary thing, because we're gonna lose something that connects human beings to each other, and that's with being with each other. And one of the things I remember in the thing with the blue zones, and you had sort of mentioned something. It's really important. We are social animals. We need each other. We ever since hundreds of thousands of years ago, when the hunter gatherers were in the tribes, we depended upon each other, but in person relationships, and that's caring relationships is so important for our survival. So that's what I'm afraid of. But I think people need to be more aware of the danger of that. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I think that's a very, very empowering note to leave things on. Did you want to share anything or any links where people can connect with you or find your work? I'll make sure to leave
Well,
notes as
well,
well.
I could put in the notes. I'm actually I have my website, which is michaeljdorfman.com, which is my name, which I think you have the notes there. But I'm doing another website now, which is going to be exclusively on health. It's going to be the name of my book, which is Longevity Wellness Revolution .com. So yeah, but I'll share. I have Substack. I'm going to be in the future. I'm going to be doing more coaching, nutrition, health coaching, and I send out every week an article on my Substack. It's mostly on health, but sometimes on what's happening geopolitically around the world. Yeah, so I'll share that with you, whatever you don't have, and I really appreciate this. I appreciate just being interviewed by you. It was really wonderful.
Oh, well, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for listening to Changemaker Q&A, a production of the Humanitarian Changemakers Network. We'd like to thank our sponsors and partners who make this show possible. Whether you're just starting your changemaking journey or looking to fill your changemaking toolkit and amplify your impact, head to schoolofsocialimpact.org and check out our free Social Impact Foundations training. If you have a question you'd like answered on the show or have a story to share, you'll find the question submission form and guest expression of interest forms in the show notes. Tiana and the team would like to recognise the traditional owners of the land this podcast was produced on and extend that to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, and recognise that sovereignty was never ceded. We extend our respect to all First Nations people globally and acknowledge that our community of changemakers are impacted by colonialism and extractive capitalism in different ways.